Very good evening, students.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Very good evening. Good evening. So George is here. So very good evening, George. There it's good. Where it is morning, right? So here it is 8 o'clock in the evening.
Good morning. It's 10:30 here.
Yeah. Thank you, George. Thank you for joining with us today. So, dear students, as you all aware that in the last 1 week, we have been conducting so many lectures as a part of our lecture series. Today, we are having our special guest, Dr. George Richards from University of Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, and he has a total of 17 years of both teaching and research experience. And so he is presently working in the Department of Criminal Justice, Anthropology, and Forensic Science in the Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, United States of America. Dr. Richards, he maintains an active research agenda that focuses on the criminal victimization of refugees. He has regularly published in peer-reviewed and popular publications and frequently presents at regional, national, and international conferences on criminal justice related topics. During the spring 2019 September, he was a Fulbright senior specialist in the Department of Criminology at Raksha Shakti University, Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India. During the summer 2019 term, Dr. Richard served with Professors Without Borders at the University of Sierra Leone, Freetown, Sierra Leone, and is on the board of two orphanages there. Dr. Richards has been named the Educator of the Year, Advisor of the Year, and Scholar of the Year by Edinburgh University over the courses of his career there. He is the only faculty member in the history of the institution to have earned all three awards. He earned board certification in security management with a certified protection professionals, designation from the American Society of Industrial Security. Dr. Richards was the president of the Ohio Council of Criminal Justice Education for 2 terms, and he was also a member of the Ethics and Professional Conduct Committee of the Ohio State Bar Association, and he is also a vice chair of the President's Diversity Council at Edinburgh University. We have Professor George with us, and he has a long and extensive years of both research and teaching experience. He is a very good teacher, right? So he's a very good teacher, and also he's a very good researcher as well. So I have been associating with George for more than 5 years. So we both are very good friends. So thank you so much for having kindly accepted my invitation to be part of this lecture series, George. So our students are basically they are undergraduates and they are pursuing their bachelor degree in criminology and the police administration. So hope your lecture will enrich their knowledge in the field of criminology. And today George is here. So on behalf of the DG Vaishnav College and the Department of Criminology, I extend my sincere welcome to Dr. George Richards. Now I request George to proceed further. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, George, we can hear you.
Okay. Michael, right now I'm going to try to present my screen and just let me know if you can see it, please.
Yeah. Shanmu, SP ma'am, please give access. Yeah. You please give present now, George.
Can you see the screen? Can you see the PowerPoint?
No. SP ma'am, are you there?
Yes, sir, but there
Have
is
you given
nothing on my
permission?
side to give access, sir.
Okay. George, have you please press that button present now so that.
I did.
Okay, but it's not visible here. There is an option called present now. Yeah, it's appearing. Yes, George, it has come now.
Can you see that now?
Yes, I can see that now. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Good evening. It's morning here for me. It's 10:32 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the United States. It's always a pleasure to come back to Vaishnav, albeit virtually this time. I've been working with Dr. Valen and Dr. Carriel for going on, I guess, right, 5 years now. It's been a while. I first met these two folks when I came to Chennai to present at a couple of conferences, and I came back. They kindly invited me back in December of 17 to participate in a conference that Vaishnav put on. And I absolutely had a wonderful time there. And I got to know so many of the undergraduate students. And they were just wonderful. Arsh, Mitchun, Shubha, Cypria, and many others. So I remember those folks quite fondly. My presentation this morning is on occult crime, OCCULT. And this is something that has some degree of interest in the United States. Now, you need to know, and I need to preface this very carefully, my perspective on this is going to be akin to that of the Judeo-Christian ethic. I think it can be quite applicable anywhere in the world, but you need to be able to apply vital notions of both religion and concepts of evil to it. The occult, before I get started, the occult is a vehicle by which people can perpetrate, but more often than not, rationalize criminal actions. So I want to preface that before I get started. All right, one of the things I encourage as a professor, and I always have, is that especially for undergraduates, it's very difficult to get your minds around the theoretical. And it was for me. You are being exposed to things that you've got no personal knowledge of. So how do you relate it? How do you understand it? Well, if you've had no personal experience, what do you know? Well, you know popular culture. You know television, you know films, you know books, be it nonfiction or fiction, what have you. So that is where we go to the well to draw from in order to understand and appreciate any type of abstract concept, be it in criminal justice or any area of life. Now, one of the questions I always get asked about from students is, why are these types of crimes worthy of our study? I teach a graduate course in occult crime probably once a year or so at the University of Louisville, Louisville, Kentucky, United States. And I have a great time with the class. It's a lot of fun. And the students there are always engaged. But one of the things they do want to know is, why is this worthy of our time and attention? Because I will tell you straight up front, there's not a lot of crime, a high percentage of crimes that are perpetrated with occult overtones. However, the bizarre nature of these acts are very much, they are bizarre as to register with the vast majority of society and to be identified by the vast majority of society, to cause a belief that these are commonplace. And for that reason alone, I think we need to address them. We talk about culture. It's pretty much just a whole way of life. Anything we've got, attitudes, ideas, languages, cultural practices, could be art, architecture, types of commodities, food, transportation, anything. A lot of times people will talk about high culture, which is going to be the arts or literature. That's not what I mean here. Culture here are the everyday practices of people in a given society. Now, that society might be on the micro level, the community level. It might be on the macro level, more of a state and nation approach or region. But a culture is simply an entire way of life. From the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night, even while you sleep and what you sleep on, everything that we engage in. Popular culture in the United States is a very integral part of culture in the United States as a whole. I think it might be perhaps the most integral part as we have entered the 21st century. Simply because popular culture is becoming more and more widespread with the advent of electronic media. It allows students to be able to recognize the abstract, as I mentioned earlier. You're able to identify these things from the cultures you already know and you realize. It provides an approach for students to become informed consumers of technology, more aptly put, I think, more informed consumers of data. This is one of the things I preach in my classes on when I teach research methods. One of the things I want them to take from that class is to be an informed consumer of data, to be able to assess and judge the information they get. And to do so, know how to collect and how to assess information. And the same thing is here. You are being inundated constantly with information off the World Wide Web. How do you know what information is viable? Because there's a lot out there that isn't. And unfortunately, people will think all too often if something is written down that it is the truth. And this is maybe the farthest thing from the truth. You go to reputable sources. You're able to judge the literature for what it is, triangulate, and all of this takes a certain degree of education and training to do, which means you all are prepared to do this. Popular culture closes the gap, though, between what you all are, an elite class, you have knowledge, and the rest of folks, the laymen in society, in order to develop a kind of knowledge and a very critical practice that everybody can share. If we do not address popular culture, if we do not appreciate our place in it, if we don't approach it critically and analyze it, we're not doing so in order to denounce it necessarily, but in order to understand how it works on us. People believe that if you analyze something, you are looking for a way to criticize it. This is not necessarily the case. More often than not, it probably isn't. We simply want to understand how it impacts. It is about how we are represented in it and how we represent it in our day-to-day lives. Now, there are two ways to study popular culture that I discuss in class. There's a lot of ways, but there's two in particular. One is going to be the semiotic dimension, which is the study of signs, the study of signs. The second will be an allegorical dimension. It's a representation, sculpture, a painting, whatever, that tells multiple stories at many levels. So you've got the semiotic and you've got the allegorical, these two dimensions. Other terms I'd like you to know before we get into the presentation is hegemonic culture. It's a culture that expresses the ruling order of any given social formation. It is going to be the culture that is most commonly expressed, the culture that will have the greatest impact upon ideas, attitudes, and practices. Then you've got a subculture. Now, be careful here. What I'm giving you is probably going to be the most commonly used sociological definition of a subculture. And I don't disagree with it. It's a social group that is both subversive to some of the dominant culture's cherished rules and oppressed by them, struggling for a different way to live. Yes. However, a subculture does not necessarily mean that it is subversive. It can coexist with the hegemonic culture, but it slightly differs in certain ways, certain beliefs, certain practices, certain attitudes. It doesn't mean it's trying to subvert it. Doesn't mean it will eventually want to replace it. Just means that you've got a minority within that society that wishes to work, operate, believe, practice, worship in another manner. In another manner. All right, what is the popular culture of crime? Why do we study it? Popular culture of crime, and I don't know how much your faculty at Vaishnav utilize popular culture. I don't know how much you use it to understand what is presented to you. If you don't, I encourage you to do so. But popular culture of crime is going to be what we see represented in movies, books, television, a lot of times any more podcasts. And within it, we look at the semiotic, we look at the allegorical. If you see a portrayal of a criminal on television, that is an allegorical representation. Within that character portrayal, you are seeing aspects of a criminal, criminal motivations, criminal behavior, all of it. All right, that's an allegorical representation. There's a great film going around. It's a documentary. If you've never seen it, I encourage you to do so. It is on YouTube, and there are several clips on it going around on YouTube, so you can plug it in at any time. These are called the Iceman tapes, ICEMAN tapes. And these are interviews that were conducted in prison by Dr. Park Dietz of the mafia hitman Richard Kuklinski. And what the allegorical personification of Kuklinski within the popular culture of crime and how we view hitmen and how we view serial killers and how we view the mafia and so on is right there wrapped up in Kuklinski. I will also say, as an aside, I have been doing what I have been doing for a living for going on 30 years now, over 30 years now, both as a student and as a college instructor. And I've seen quite a bit, and there's not a lot at this point that shocks me or horrifies me. The tape or those films of Richard Kuklinski, those interviews, those were unnerving when you look at this guy. Because one of the things that we're going to be talking about in this presentation is the notion of evil. And whereas Kuklinski is not portrayed by the interviewing psychiatrist, Dr. Dietz, as evil, if you look into his eyes, you're going to have a difficult time not seeing evil there, I promise you. So I really encourage you, when you have time, to check these films out. You appreciate cultural components of communities in which crime occurs. How does crime differ from one community to another? Is crime indeed a crime in another community? All right, one of the things you have to remember is that crime is a crime because the state says it's a crime. And this is not necessarily the case with different communities. Certainly not when you cross national boundaries. An example I will give you from my country, the United States. 50 years ago, attitudes towards marijuana were very strict. It was considered a deviant act if you used marijuana. Not so much anymore. Roughly half the states now will allow recreational use of marijuana. All states for quite a few years now have allowed medical usage of marijuana. So these societal attitudes are changing. So the crime, it's no longer a crime in certain communities. And the culture and the acceptance of same has changed. All right, now let's get into the occult. The connotation of occult now is going to be the macabre. It's going to be something bordering on the realm of the supernatural. This is not what it was meant originally. Occult simply means hidden, and it was hidden knowledge. It was a source of knowledge, a body of knowledge, literature, scripture, whatever, was kept from the unprepared. It was considered sacred. And if you were to share this with those that were not considered prepared, that is, were given to be worshipful of a deity, was profane. It was a sin. These were knowledge, and this body of knowledge was knowledge and clues left by God to benefit mankind. And they could only be discerned by those that were educated or enlightened in that regard. And in antiquity, up through the medieval ages, you're looking at people that would practice this as magicians. It was magic. This is certainly not the case, but this is what people at that time believed. So occult originally meant hidden. Hidden. Hollywood steps in. I don't know. I hope some of these references to popular culture are applicable to you and you've recognized some of them. These are movies in which you're going to see, they've got occult overtones, but there's crimes that are perpetrated. There you see on the left, you will see a movie poster for Rosemary's Baby. This came out in the early 1970s. It's about a young woman who was possessed by the devil, became pregnant as a result. And in the act of protecting her and her child, anyone that was deemed a threat to her was done away with, was murdered. A French film, Forces Occultes, that came out in the early 1940s, talked about how a hidden conspiracy was impacting France's place in World War II and how they were being manipulated by both the Germans and the Allies. And this conspiracy was thought of, for the most part, to be organized and manipulated by Freemasons. And there you will see on the upper right side of the poster, you're going to see the Masonic emblem of compass and square. Others are going to be, these are going to be a little dated for you guys, so I don't think you'd probably, both of these films are going to be on YouTube. Race with the Devil, it's another film with occult overtones, certainly. The one on the bottom right, Satan's School for Girls, likewise too. All of these have occult overtones, and it's beyond the supernatural. It dwells in the realm of Lucifer, of Satan, which there is a growing Christian culture in India, so I think some of you ought to be more familiar with this than others, but I think there's a certain degree of familiarity with it there. When I've talked to students in India about this before, and I gave a similar lecture to this when I was at Raksha Shakti in 2019, a lot of the students recognized it. you've got to appreciate that the occult has become over time more associated with the evil that is personified by Satan, by the devil. And here are two prime examples of that. All right. Satanism became mainstream beginning in the 1950s when Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, started preaching the gospel of hedonism that was associated with the Church of Satan. He created it, he founded it, he wrote the initial literature for it. And there were, because of, I think, of just its bizarre different nature, quite a few Hollywood stars that started joining it and adhering to it. There you will see kneeling before LaVey. And LaVey, I've got to be careful here, but one of the things that when I give a lecture, I just take it for granted that people want to hear my opinion, so here's my opinion. LaVey was a scam artist. He was. I don't think he bought into Satanism any more than anybody else, but it was a vehicle by which he could gain notoriety. And he certainly did that. You would see LaVey, he was dressed up in garb there with the horns, and you can't see it very well in that black and white picture, but he has a dark robe on, he has a tail sticking out. It's just, he's very much just a huckster. And then you've got Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield was a well-known actress from the 1960s. And she was one of his followers. Guys, can I ask you all, Michael, are you still there?
Yes, Judge.
Do you all get Law and Order Special Victims Unit on TV there?
Sorry?
There's an American TV show, Law and Order. Do you get it there?
No, I think people who use Netflix, they may be aware of the Deepak, sir.
Okay.
Deepak, sir. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
In some streaming platform, Netflix, yeah.
Okay. Okay. There's a show there. It's been on television for over 20 years in one form or another. It's called Law and Order. And there's a branch of the show that's called Law and Order Special Victims Unit. And Jane Mansfield's daughter is one of the stars on that show. I was just going to throw that out to you. If it is on Amazon Prime, if you can get it for free streaming, try to watch it. I think you're going to find a lot of good allegorical depictions of criminals and certain types of acts through that. Jane Mansfield had a falling out with LaVey. Something happened between them. We're not sure quite what, but they broke ways. They parted. LaVey made a big public announcement that he had put a curse on her. A few weeks later, she was killed in a car accident. So people blamed it on LaVey. That certainly was not the case at all. It was just a coincidence, I'm sure. But people that were very easily manipulated believed this and bought into it. Other Hollywood efforts, Paranormal Activity, Ouija, those are two that you're going to find to have occult overtones with crime involved. And what else? Look, anything that pretty much is popular culture that is shared that is supposed to be representative of culture and is somewhat entertaining and or has been put together for entertainment value. One of the things, and I'm sure there were quite a few in India years and years ago, and they have been off the market really for about 60 years now, maybe even longer, were old-time radio shows. And prior to the advent of television and prior to really the widespread use of motion pictures, people would be entertained by radio serial dramas. And a lot of these had crime shows, and many of them had these type of occult overtones, these criminals that used the occult to rationalize what they did and how they did it. It is anything that we could put together for entertainment value. All right, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, evil comes in the form of Satan. And there you see Christ being tempted by Satan when he is alone in the wilderness. And there it starts. And that representation is still quite real to us today. And what we see is occult crime is generally criminal activity fueled or influenced by the occult through beliefs, ritual, commonly held to be associated with Satan. That is not what the occult originally meant, but over time it has evolved to encompass this meaning. This is one of the key things of this lecture I want you to take with you. Here in the United States, occult crime by and large is juvenile in nature. It is perpetrated by juveniles. Now, let me back up. This type of crime, when I say it is juvenile in nature, juveniles here are not going out and perpetrating extraordinarily violent crime. It does occur. I'm going to give you examples of it. When I mean juvenile in nature here, you're going to see vandalism that uses occult symbology, the semiotic. All right, and that is simply, I think, a lot of times for shock value. And that's about the best way I can describe that. So occult crime in the United States is bizarre. It, I think, is more concerning to many than it actually is. But when a crime, a violent crime, occurs that uses the occult, it can be extraordinarily bloody, put it like that. There you have the Crua Misa, the cross of the Christian cross, the sign of signs. There is no other symbol in all of Christendom so sacred. You will not see too many of these used in occult rituals simply because of the ultimate, of what this sign means ultimately, the power of good. All right, the allegorical story of Christ's sacrifice on the cross. But you will see this in various other uses. Cross iconography through history, there you've got Celtic crosses, Ankh crosses. There's variants that have been used throughout time. Most of these, and we don't see this often anymore, have some type of circle to where the bars intersect, but you could still make out the cross quite clearly. Occult crime symbolism, some people look for these symbols where they simply are not. There you're going to find the Nabisco. Nabisco is a cookie manufacturer here in the United States. Some people, and the top of the Nabisco emblem there has two lines intersected by a vertical, two horizontal lines that are intersected with a vertical line, which resembles the Knights Templar shield, which you will see there on the right, and that is considered part of the occult, the Knights Templar. So there are people who are really stretching for conspiracies that believe Nabisco is influenced by the occult. Let's not go there, but some people do actually believe this. You will see this quite often in occult rituals. The cross of St. Peter. You're going to see an upside-down cross. Because St. Peter, when he was crucified upside down. All right? The crucifixion of Christ generally depicts Christ as his head was placed upon the short bar, the short vertical bar, arms stretched to the right. With Peter, it was the opposite. Peter's head was at the bottom of the cross, the legs towards the top, standing up. So you will see the inverted cross, and this is known as the cross of St. Peter. Other occult crime symbolism, to the left you'll have the pentagram. It addresses all five elements. And then you have the Star of Baphomet. What you're going to see there is going to be the symbol of the beast, the goat, if you will. And you're going to see these two that are going to be portrayed quite often. Other occult crime symbols, semiotic depictions. One of the things that is eschatology. Eschatology is the study of end times and theology in the United States and throughout the Western world, I think. Really, it is an analysis of the book of Revelation, the last book in the New Testament, and most holy Christian scriptures, the last book in the Bible. It's all about the situation in the world, the battle between good and evil that will usher in the age of Christ. And Christ is doing battle with what they call the Antichrist. And followers of the Antichrist are supposed to have a sign placed somewhere on their bodies in the shape or form of a 666. And those 3 6s. And here in this country, many people to this day will avoid anything that has 3 6s in it just for that reason. There you'll have Walt Disney. I know you all have had some familiarity with Disney Company for Disney films and all of that. How Disney signed his name, and people look for 3 6s in it, and that's ridiculous. But you have to understand, there are some people that are going to look for conspiracies anywhere they can possibly see them. And when you look at the Disney signature there, you're going to be able to see that some people make out 3 6s there. I don't necessarily buy that at all, but they do. And this goes back to something else. Please keep in mind, folks, that perception is reality. If you perceive something to be true, even though it may very well be not, it is true to you. And when you communicate with that person, you've got to be able to appreciate what they believe, what they value. All right. This notion of the occult and the evil of Satanism took off in the United States in the early 1980s. There were 2 books, Michelle Remembers and When Rabbit Howls. They were written by women who maintained that they had been victimized through satanic sex. 1987, Geraldo Rivera, a investigative reporter here, did a show for ABC News, a documentary titled Satanic Ritual Abuse. He claimed there were over 1 million Satanists in the U.S., and they were all linked through an underground network. This was some of the most irresponsible reporting in human history. He simply pulled this out of the air, made it up, and he talked to people who spouted these statistics off and had no basis from which to create them. They had no basis in reality or fact. Christians panicked, and other folks looked to backmasking. Backmasking, and this is something else. I'm dating myself, and you all, I'm sure your parents, maybe not even your parents now, I'm feeling very old here, but your grandparents, some of them, would certainly remember the old-time vinyl records. And backmasking was if you were to play a record, vinyl record, backwards, then you would hear hidden messages within it. Many of these would have satanic overtones to them. And did it happen? Yes, there were some. The rock groups Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles' White Album, all of these, if you played them backward, had hidden messages in them. Could that be done? Yes, it could be done. It could be manipulated by a very talented sound engineer, and these were done as jokes on the listening audience. It became so popular and so widespread, this notion of all these Satanists operating, that in universities, social work students were trained in how to identify the warning signs of satanic ritual in homes. And it really got to the point of to where it was bordering on the ridiculous. There are challenges to the investigation of any type of crime, but in this type of crime with occult overtones, there are several. Number one is the hyperbole. It's the language that is used to excite that surrounds it. The public opinion and panic simply because of the bizarre and perceptually evil nature. There's not a lot of people out there that have expertise in the occult. There's not. There's a few, and they are, for the most part, theologians. You're not going to find a lot of folks that have, that I would consider expert occult crime investigators. You've got a few guys out there and girls who have investigated crimes that have occult overtones. But there's nobody out there that I can really think of that is a great expert on the two and the intersection of the two. You need to take this stuff seriously. If you're going to prevent it, you're going to mitigate it, or you are going to investigate it correctly. You've got to take it seriously, but you've got to take it seriously in the right way. It has got to follow the same investigative pattern as any type of crime. Understanding all too well what you are dealing with here and the type of belief systems of those perpetrators. But you've got to take it serious in that light. The Manson family, the Manson murders that took place in California in 1969. Charles Manson was considered, this is one of the most bizarre criminals in American history, and he was indeed that. He was bizarre. The story of Manson is one of, this guy's a master manipulator, extremely charismatic. He found a following of folks that were marginalized, lost, if you will, looking for somebody to believe in, someone to hang on to, and they found Charles Manson, unfortunately for them. Know this. When people talk about Charles Manson, I know most of y'all have heard of him, Charles Manson never committed one murder. He influenced others to do so, but he never did any himself. People believe because of the very gory and the very bloody nature of those crimes, the Tate murders and the Bianca murders, that they were occult driven. No, they were not. They were not. Manson later on, when he was in prison, stated they were, but no, not at the time. The Son of Sam, one of the most famous serial murders in American history, operated in 1976 in New York City. He killed 6 and wounded 7. In 1975, he had joined a cult that engaged in animal sacrifice. During the time of his initial interrogation, he claimed to have been obeying a demon and that he acted alone. It is believed that Berkowitz claimed all this in order to try to get an insanity defense. It did not work. He is still in prison, has now become a born-again Christian, and is a model prisoner. Berkowitz will probably never, ever see the outside of a prison. And he has been locked up now for about going on 45 years. And I don't think he will ever see the outside of a prison. He'll be in for the rest of his life, what little is left. Richard Ramirez. You're going to see Ramirez there in court at his sentencing. He raises up his left hand. On that left hand is going to be the pentagram. Okay. Ramirez might have understood what that meant. He might not have, but he certainly understood it as an occult symbol. And he just put that up there to show and to emphasize how bizarre he was and the nature of his acts. 13 murders, 11 rapes around 1984 in and about San Francisco, California. He had read about the Church of Satan when he was a teen. And when he was sentenced, he released a statement saying, Lucifer is within us all, see you in Disneyland. Simply stating that we are all followers of Lucifer, we all have evil in us. He died in 2013 of lymphoma. At certain of his crime scenes, not all of them, but you did see occult symbology. Ricky Casso. This is one of the most bizarre ones. Now, this is a juvenile at the time. Casso murdered fellow teen Gary Lowers, stabbed him 17 times. His body was burned, eyeballs gouged out. He was thought to be under the influence of PCP or LSD. In that crime and how the body was laid out afterwards, there were very heavy satanic ritualistic aspects. Casso was very heavily into heavy metal music, and this took place in 1984 on April 30th, Walsford Nacht, which is considered one of the dark dates in occult, the occult calendar. And this is probably going to be one of the most blatant crimes perpetrated using the occult. Casso here, I believe he was able to use occult symbology as a vehicle by which to express the criminal act. Now you have to understand here, and I want to go back and reemphasize this. Do I believe these crimes were perpetrated by some type of unseen force? No, of course not. They were perpetrated using the occult as an ideological and semiotic way in which to express the act. Eubank, Kentucky, Rex Allen Murphy, 2014. He was convicted of the sexual battery of a minor. He had claimed to be both a warlock, a male witch, and also a Sunday school teacher. The boy he victimized, he told the boy he victimized that he would kill him using his warlock powers. It was thought that later on he had been a follower of Wicca. Lori Potarth in Oklahoma, 2014. She was part of a Native American tribe that routinely used peyote, and it was thought that she perpetrated her acts while under the influence of either peyote or methamphetamine, perhaps both. She claimed it was part of her legitimate practice as a Wiccan. She didn't perpetrate murder, but she abused her children quite viciously and claimed that Wiccanism was the reason for this. North Carolina, 2014. Pazuzu Ila Algarad, real name John Alexander Lawson. He was a high school dropout. This guy is bizarre to say the least. He picked up 2 prostitutes, killed and ate them, so he was a cannibal. He was not an occultist. He was mentally ill. mentally ill. He named himself after a demon that was portrayed in the movie The Exorcist, and he called his home the House of the Devils. And once again, the occult here, Satanism, was viewed. And he used this as an ideological vehicle to perpetrate crimes. I'm going to go on. I'm going to pass that one up. 2014, Florida. 2014 was a big year. $2 million in meth was confiscated in the Everglades. And there were 13 arrests for drug and weapons trafficking charges of this group. These were adherents to voodoo, and they were operating a criminal gang. But prior to their apprehension and arrest, investigating officers consulted a voodoo priest first to try to understand these folks, what they believed, how they believed it, where they might be operating at, which goes back to taking this seriously in an investigation. You've got to understand who and what you're going for. In Pennsylvania, 2014, Miranda Barber, Alette Barber, an older sister, would find people on Craigslist, and which was a way of meeting people. It's not so popular now as it once was, but it was a web-based way of meeting people. You also bought and sold items you could advertise on Craigslist. And she was a self-described Satanist, had very dubious claims of killing over a dozen people. Was she influenced by LaVey's writings? Yes, we believe she was. Did it cause her to do this? No, it may have given her some degree of justification. She claimed to have killed over a dozen people. This is dubious. She might have killed as many as 2. But the fact that her claim to killing a dozen, no, I don't buy that, neither does anybody else. Mexico City, 2012, occult worshiping the spirit of death, Los Santisme Muerte. They sacrificed 2 boys and an adult woman to Satan. This cult had a bizarre blend of Christianity, Indian tradition peculiar to Mexico, and folk beliefs. The sacrifices were done in a very public manner. They were not done in public, but the word got out in public purposely to instill fear in the general community. Backing up a few years to 2011, Massachusetts, Caius Veiovius. This guy did a little bit of research. He found there was a Roman god by the name of Veiovius, who was a god of the underworld. With 3 other people, Veiovius murdered 3 men. And he was arrested in a hotel in Maine at a blood drinking ceremony. When he was apprehended, he told police he was both a Satanist and a vampire. He was sentenced to life without possibility of parole for 3 murders. And what he had done there, and certainly his face is tattooed, if you'll see in the center of his forehead, the mark of the beast, the 3 6s mentioned earlier, and he had taken some type of something, probably silicone based, to inject himself in the forehead to give the appearance of horns, not to mention the nose piercing. Not just the United States, 2011 South Africa. Christy Theologio killed. Another girl was set on fire. That's her mother holding up her picture there. Defendants described it as a satanic sacrifice. The participants were not sure what that meant. The others who were there witnessing it never really saw that or heard anything at the scene that would allow them to believe that, the perpetrators were engaging in any type of satanic act. It's believed, once again, the same way with Berkowitz, that they were using this as part of an insanity plea. But you're going to be able to see this is floating around on YouTube all the time. This this act. All right, this is 2020, and this gives an example of, and this is what I'm going to close with, the use of the occult as a justification or what you see in vandalism. And this was fairly recent, about a month ago. Rutherford County, North Carolina, was a church that was vandalized. Quite a bit of the interior was burned, windows broken out, satanic and occult graffiti that was spray painted all over the church, the inside of the church, outside of the church, etc. This is going to be the most common type of occult crime, vandalism. It is the minor, okay? This guy was not a juvenile. I think that the one, Henderson, who has since been apprehended, was 21 there. He's not a juvenile. He's young enough. But these are more often than not are going to be perpetrated by juveniles. It's done for shock value. And they want to be considered bizarre. They want to be considered different for whatever reason. But know this, if the occult is used in a particular type of violent crime, generally homicide, that crime is going to be, number one, especially bizarre, and number two, probably pretty bloody. And how do we know that the occult is present? Well, there's several ways. The semiotic is going to be the most obvious. Are there signs at the scene? The pentagram, Star of Baphomet, the cross of St. Peter, and others. How the body is laid out. Are the head and legs straight? Are they vertical? Are the arms horizontal to the side? Or are they splayed out? Okay, all appendages going in 4 different directions. Are there burn marks at the scene? Are there and there's a whole host of other signs investigators can look for. Okay, this concludes my presentation. Well, at this time, I suppose, Michael, if anybody's got any questions for me, I'll take those now.
Students, if you have any doubt, you can ask him. Anybody have any doubt?
Sir.
Anybody? Yeah, please ask.
Sir, 1 second. Could you say me Rex Allen Murphy, sir?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Repeat, Padra, Gautam.
Sir, Rex Allen Murphy, sir.
Rex
2014 incident.
Rex Allen Murphy, the guy out of Eubank, Kentucky. Just a minute, I'm going to go back to that slide. Rex Allen Murphy was a guy that was simply the. Hang on just a moment, please. What was your question about Rex Allen Murphy?
Sir, I need to know about him 1 second, sir. That's just.
All right, Rex Allen Murphy was he was convicted of the sexual battery of a minor, a young boy, and he had claimed to be a warlock, which was a male witch. He was a follower of Wicca, W-I-C-C-A, and he told this boy, and the young man was very impressionable, very much a juvenile, obviously, and he was very scared by Murphy, who had convinced this boy that if he did not let him abuse him, he convinced the boy that if he did not let Murphy abuse him, that he would use his warlock powers to kill him. All right?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, George, do you have any nationwide statistics on occult crimes?
No. Look, one of the things, Michael, I'm sure you teach there is going to be the dark figure of crime. You know, there's crimes that we know and crimes we suspect. And I'll say two things. You're not going to get a handle on this as far as the number. I will tell you, I'm convinced it is limited in number. And the reason that is important for study is going to be the bizarre nature of them. As far as widespread, you're certainly going to find many more cases of juvenile perpetration of minor crimes such as graffiti, vandalism, using the occult symbology.
So do
But
you
as
think,
far as any type of database, no.
yeah, so do you think that this type of crimes are highly prevalent among juveniles?
Yes.
Is there any scope to study them?
Pardon me?
Is there any scope to study them, to study those
No, there's not.
juveniles?
There's not been a great deal of study about this. There's not.
Okay, okay,
And I think the reason for that is going to be, number one, the very limited pool of subjects you would have to study.
okay, okay. Thank you. So, any students, anybody have any doubts?
Professor, I would like to ask a question, if that is all right. Uh, I would like to know
Yes,
how important Satan worshipping is an element of occult crime.
it's absolutely important. It's essential at this point in time. 50 years ago, not so much. Or, well, excuse me, go back probably 100 years ago, not so much. Beginning in probably the 60s and 70s, it was absolutely essential. And it still is today. The occult is I won't say exactly synonymous with Satanism, but it's awfully close. Awfully close.
Oh, okay, understood, Professor. Thank you. Because recently in India, we had a case where two daughters were murdered by their parents because they went to a voodoo priest as such, who convinced the parents that if you murder them, they would come back to life. So, would you consider that case as an example of occult crime? Because there is no element of
Yes.
Satanism in it. However,
Yes.
it has all the other factors.
Yes, I would. Now you have to understand from my perspective as I opened up, this is my presentations from the Judeo-Christian ethic. But that I'm convinced this is prevalent throughout the entire world. If you go with the notion of hidden knowledge and evil, okay, and anytime you've got a religion, you've got to have some type of notion of bad or evil attached to it. So do I
Yes.
consider that an occult crime? Yes, absolutely I do.
All right. Thank you, Professor.
Yes, ma'am. Good to hear your voice.
Me too, Professor.
Yeah. So, anybody, any other doubts? It's the final call.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Mm, 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 mm. Yeah. Even Chennai, we have few temples are there in Chennai.
Oh,
Yeah. Mm, yeah. Mm, yeah. 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 Mm, Yeah,
I'm
particularly in the
familiar
state
with
of
some of
Assam.
these, and
Yeah,
I've heard about some of these happening in Assam.
yeah, Assam. Yeah.
And if you get, I like the way you phrased that, the mystic. I think that's very good. And I'm going to remember to do that in the future and describe more what mystic means. But I like the way you did that. I don't know this. I would like to hear more about those satanic crimes that were perpetrated in India. I have got a feeling that a lot of those crimes there that were used in India, that were done in India, with satanic overtones, were influenced by popular culture. That the perpetrators watched movies or TV shows that had they had portrayals of Satanism or Satanist worshippers or somebody, a criminal who used the occult and occult symbology when they perpetrated their crimes. That's what I would suspect. I don't know this, but I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't the case. And that was in Trivandrum.
Yeah, yes, Judge. Even in Andhra also, the one which Amrita told that was just happened. And unfortunately, the parents are professors. That is the case.
I'm sorry to hear that. Look, if you ever get a chance, please send me that, a news clipping about that. Just send it to me through email. I'd like to read about it.
Yeah, sure. Even this time, one of my students, we are conducting a study on people's opinion on occult crime. Only after listening your lecture, I'm just thinking of changing the topic. Like we have given some 5 case studies which are happened in India, and it's a kind of vignette study. So from that newspaper reporting, we have asked the people's opinion. So what is their opinion on these cases? I'll share that findings with
Please
you.
do.
Yeah, yeah.
And Dr. Deepak, I'm glad to see you here. It was an honor for you to ask me to write the foreword to your book. I'll never forget that. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, George. Now I request Aparna to propose the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. It gives me an immense pleasure to propose this vote of thanks. First of all, I express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. George Richards for spending his valuable time with this interesting and informative lecture. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank the management and the Department of Criminology and Police Administration for creating a learning platform for us. I extend my thanks to Dr. Michael, sir, for organizing this lecture series. I also thank Dr. Amrita Karayal ma'am, Dr. Deepak sir, and Ms. Shanmugapriya ma'am for the constant support. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants for attending this lecture. Once again, I thank one and all.
Yeah, thank you, Aparna. Thank you. So, George, I'm so sorry. One of the students is asking that is there any preventive measures to deal with such crimes, occult crimes? Is there any preventive measures?
I mean, it's nothing beyond really education and nothing beyond, well, I know. I mean, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, you can't curb popular culture. You're not going to be able to go in and find somebody who is easily manipulated. Their belief patterns are easily manipulated and root them out and try to educate them. I think this would be very difficult to do. I think it would be extraordinarily difficult to do because you're not going to find you're not going to find cults. I'm sorry. There are cults, yes, to be sure. For the most part, when people have perpetrated these, it's going to be the individual acting alone. And those are going to be very, very hard to find.
Yes, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for allowing me.
Thank you so much, Judge.
Honor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judge. So we'll see you in another. I'll give his number. You can contact him. Yeah. Yeah.
Please do. I would love to hear from you all, and I hope to see you all at Vaishnav in the near future.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. God bless all of you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Judge. See you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir.